Hi there. In this video I'm going to be sharing information relating to perming hair and relaxing a permanent wave. As we know, perming hair is a chemical service that we provide to alter hair from straight to wavy or curly, and clearly relaxing a permanent wave would be to reduce the amount of curl that has been created with a permanent wave. I think it's really important to understand that perming is a chemical service that we provide, and as such it's really important that you develop a knowledge and understanding of that chemical process and its effect on the hair shaft, and also the types of solutions and types of perming that are available to us, and the troubleshooting and the things that can perhaps go awry if you don't develop a really sound knowledge. So we're going to look first at the chemical process of perming, remembering that the chemical processes take place in the cortex of the hair. So we're going to be looking at what changes in terms of the cortical fibres contained in the cortex and how we're going to restructure those fibres to take the hair from a straight to a wavy structure. So the first thing we're going to start with today in our video is talking about the chemical process of hairdressing. We're then going to talk about the different types of perms that are available. We're going to look at acid and alkaline waves and the features of those. We're going to talk about the factors to consider when we're looking at what rod size to use and what rod selection to use. I'm going to go over a rod placement, and then we're going to talk about some of the safety issues and some of the troubleshooting with our perming. So in terms of the chemical action of perming on the hair shaft, let's look at this diagram, and this is just a really simple diagram to demonstrate the action of the perm and neutralise process on the hair shaft. So our side areas are our polypeptide chains, and our linkages across here are our disulfide bonds. Now they're made of two single sulfur atoms that are joined together. So when we have hair that is unaltered, the hair is in a state of cysteine. That is essentially that the cortical fibres and the cross bonds have not been altered. In terms of the perm process, where we look at reduction and oxidation, that is an area where the cortical fibres are altered. So here where we look at reduction, the hair is in a state of cysteine, and here in oxidation, the hair is still in a state of cysteine. If we talk first about reduction, now that is the process when we have wound the hair into rods and applied the perm solution. What happens is the hydrogen from the perm solution is attracted to the disulfide bonds. It reduces the disulfide bond to single sulfur atoms. Now not all of the disulfide bonds are separated. If that happened, the whole hair would fall apart. So we need to be careful that we're not over-processing the hair or using too strong a solution on the hair that's causing too many of the disulfide bonds to separate. Once the hair has had adequate processing time and enough of the disulfide bonds have been reduced to single sulfur atoms, we look at rinsing the perm solution from the hair and neutralising the hair. The neutraliser contains oxygen, that is its active ingredient. The role of that oxygen is to attract the hydrogen so that the sulfur atoms can rejoin and form disulfide bonds in the shape of the rod to create the wave or the movement. Now whilst this area of the chemical process is taking place, the hair is still in a state of cysteine because the hair is still currently being altered. Once the neutraliser has been removed from the hair returns to a state of cysteine in the new shape or the new wave that has been created from the rod in which it's been wound around. So that is the chemical process of perm solution and neutralising process on here. There's more information about this on page 4 of the resources, and you can read that from there. So now that I've talked about the chemical action of perm solution on here, we're now going to look at the features of acid and alkaline waves and the strengths of perm solutions. Clearly when you have a client that's presented to you and comes into the salon for a perm service, you are going to have consulted her to find out what she would like done with her hair and analyse the hair and scalp to make the adequate selection for what type of perm solution you're going to use and what strength of perm solution you're going to use. It's important to understand that there are two types of perm solutions available to us. We have acid waves and we have alkaline waves, and they both have different features and different key ingredients that separate them and make them different. An acid wave, for example, is an acid pH, which is closer to the pH of hair, so it is gentler on hair. Its active ingredient is glycerol monothioglycolate. Now that is quite different to the active ingredient in an alkaline wave. What happens with an acid wave is it's much less swelling on the hair fibre, so it creates much less sensitivity. The one thing that is different with an acid wave is it does need heat to work and often has an activator that is added to the product, which gives it that exothermic quality and that inner heat within the solution itself. Unfortunately, once you mix those two components together though, you have to either use the whole lot or you have to discard what isn't used. So if you are only to be completing a part perm where you might be perming perhaps just the nape area or a side area or just a small portion of hair, an acid wave is not a particularly economical way to go. Another feature of an acid wave is that the result is much softer, there's much less odour and there's much less sensitivity in terms of the skin or the hair. So if we look at the key features of an alkaline wave is alkaline on the pH scale, and so therefore the rule of thumb with anything alkaline is it's going to have a slightly harsher effect on the hair shaft. The key ingredient for an alkaline wave is ammonium thioglycolate acid mixed with ammonia, which gives you ammonium thioglycolate. So we have, just to recap that, ammonium and thioglycolic acid mixed together gives us ammonium thioglycolate. Now there's more of this in your resource and you can read about that further there, or you can look at Wikipedia, which has quite a bit of information on this as well. With an alkaline wave, some of the key features of that is that it's suitable for most hair types. If the hair can be permed, then it's likely to be able to be permed with an alkaline wave. If you have resistant hair, you're going to get a better result with an alkaline wave, for example, than you are with an acid wave, because an acid wave is so much softer. There's no mixing with an alkaline wave, and it's a lot easier to use, and there's no wastage with an alkaline wave. If you're only popping 5 or 6 rods in one side of the hair, if you have a weighted haircut and you wanted to put some movement in here, you're not going to use an entire acid wave to create that movement in those 5 or 6 waves. If you were creating a classic perm, where you're looking at your 9 sections or your full head perm, then I guess you're not going to have wastage because you'll use an entire unit of perm solution. Either way you work. I think making sure that you familiarise yourself with the differences between the two products, the different key ingredients, and the fact that one is slightly stronger than the other is really important when you bring in your analysis of the hair and scalp and determine what products you're going to use. What is also important is that you select, if you're looking at an alkaline wave or an acid wave, you're selecting the right strength. So the acid waves still come in a variety of strengths, but remember, because they're milder, it's going to be a very mild. With your alkaline waves, you'll have a strength which is a forte strength, or a strength for resistant hair, which is the strongest of the alkaline waves. Then you'll have a normal or a regular mixation, which is a formula that's designed for hair that is probably of normal porosity, texture and elasticity, and is going to require the strength of curl that would need that strength of solution. With the mild formulations, we'll often find some companies produce a mild colour care and an extra mild formulation. So you're talking about a solution that is a colour care that has slightly more strength to it if the hair is in good condition but contains colour, and then you'll have a milder form of colour care again. So there's often, particularly in your Wella products, you have 2 levels of colour care solutions. So make sure you're analysing your hair and scalp and selecting the strength of your solution to suit 1, the hair type, and 2, the end result, what you require from your perm. In terms of your perming, we wind the hair over rods or any imaginable object you can use to perm hair with, and people are very creative with what they use. But we're referring today to your more classic perming. When you've had a little more experience, you will probably work with more of the fashion type perm. So when you're just developing that knowledge of perming, we're going to be referring mainly to our classic wines. So the factors to consider when selecting your rods are the size of the curl that you require, the hair's density, because with a thicker head of hair, the hair lies away from the scalp, so you're going to have to take that into consideration when you select your solution to get to your end result, because it's going to create, the density itself is going to have an impact on the volume, whereas a thinner head of hair has less density, will lie closer. So you know, if you use the same rods and solution strength on that particular hair type, you'll have a different result. You need to take into consideration the characteristics of the hair and scalp, and that includes the texture and the elasticity of the hair, any pre-existing natural curl, the length. If a client has, you know, waist length hair and they say they want to have lots of volume in this area here, they're not going to achieve that with the weight of the hair dragging the curl down. So you would have to take that into consideration and either use your design skills in terms of your cutting practices to create more volume at the scalp, or you would have to actually talk to the client about the actual end result when the hair is long. Making sure that you're taking into consideration when selecting the rod size is the state and condition of the hair shaft. If your hair is slightly sensitized and you wound it 50 revolutions around a tiny little perm rod, you are going to put strain on that hair shaft. So it's my recommendation to, if you have a strong head of hair and the client's wanting a firm result, then you can use a small rod and small sections to achieve a firm result. However, if you used a teeny tiny rod, you're going to use more revolutions around the rod. So you're going to have to think about the impact on your end result and the sensitivity of the hair being wound round and round and round and round a teeny tiny rod. Very, very rarely these days do we use the really small rods, because we're not seeing such curly hair in our industry and market at the moment. There are clients who, some of our more mature clients, who like to have a perm that lasts them for a long time, and they do like that really, really curly result. Very fine sections, making sure that you are selecting the rod size to suit the hair type and texture and this overall state of the scalp will give you that result. So making sure that you're actually paying consideration to all of these factors in terms of selecting your rod size is important to achieve the results you're wanting to achieve. In terms of winding, in your resource book there are some placements for the perm wind, and I'll just bring this slightly further forward so you can see this. So we have two different placements for a full head wind. We have a classic wind and we have a wind where we have a slightly smaller head. Now the classic wind, which is this wind here, contains 9 sections, and you'll see more of that in your resource, whereas this wind here that comes from the front all the way back through to the nape in one diagonal placement is designed for a head that is slightly smaller in this angle, and often this is an area where we find we can't fit 2 rods side by side, so that addresses that issue of winding the rods. Some of the key areas we need to think about in our practical skill is ensuring that we're not taking a section that's too wide and going to fall off the sides of the rod. It's also really important that our rods are close enough together to actually reduce the amount of strain on the hair structure itself. If we take a big section, it means we're going to really over direct the hair, or we're going to under direct the hair, and that could cause strain and tension on the hair. Remember, we're going to be putting a chemical on the hair, and the structure of the hair is going to be separated, so we don't want any tension whatsoever. You'll see that I've used, in the tension areas, I've popped a tissue under there to stop the rubbers from sitting on the actual hair too firmly. Some people use those little plastic pins to thread underneath the perm rubbers as well. They are quite useful. You just need to be careful when you're threading anything under a rod that you're not adding extra pressure on the hair while you get the pin or the paper in underneath there. Making sure that you're winding all of the hair will also ensure that you get an even result in your classic winds. The perm process itself is a matter of designing your shape, creating your shape, selecting your solution, selecting your rod size to suit your result, sectioning the hair and winding the hair. We then process the hair and rinse and neutralize the perm solution, and then we go on with the service to follow. So some of the things that we need to think about within our service is what can impact on that end result. And as I've already talked about the different strengths of perm solution in an acid or alkaline wave, and now talked about rod selection, let's look at processing. Now on page 11 there's some information that's provided to help you to identify or learn the knowledge to find out what might impact on the processing or the end result of your perm. And some of these factors are obviously there's hair type and whether the hair's resistant or whether it's porous and going to take the perm solution really, really quickly. Other factors that influence the processing time frame could be that if you're wanting a firm result, you need to ensure you've selected one, the right rod and solution strength, but two, you are processing your perm to the manufacturer's recommendations and long enough when you do your test curl to produce that firm result. When you're wanting to achieve a softer result, you need to stand very closely to your perm and make sure you're keeping a very close eye on the perm so that you don't over process it. So once you've gotten through that processing area of the perm service, you then go through your neutralizing service. And if you've completed year one, you should know this already. Following the neutralizing service, you are preparing the hair for the service to follow, and then you're talking to the client about her maintenance and looking after the perm itself. Remember, the client won't be familiar with looking after a perm necessarily, so you need to take the time to explain that to them. Even if a client has had previous perms, it's really good for you to refresh and recap on how they'll look after the perm. No brushing, making sure they're using their hands and a wide tooth comb so they're not putting any tension on the curl. Ensuring that their home hair care products are the right products to suit their hair type now that they've had the perm and to suit the perm service as well. Making sure they know when to have the next haircut and know when to expect to have their next perm service. So from here I'm going to actually talk about relaxing a permanent wave. In order to know or have knowledge about relaxing a permanent wave, we need to understand permanent waving. And so it's quite prudent to put this information in with our perm information. When we relax a permanent wave, we're essentially reversing the process of the curl, where we would normally wrap the hair around an item to reform the structure of the hair. We're actually going to go through the reduction and oxidation process exactly the same, but instead of wrapping the hair around a rod or some form of roller or item to create movement, we're going to be combing and working the hair straight. Now, relaxing a permanent wave formulations come in liquid and in paste forms. Clearly the paste or the cream forms are to hold the hair in place while you're actually trying to relax the permanent wave. Remember that this type of service differs very greatly from your chemical straightening services. So just to recap, our chemical process of relaxing a permanent wave is the same. We're still going through a process of reduction and oxidation. However, instead of changing the form from straight to wavy as we do when we perm the hair, we're going to go in reverse and we're going to change the structure of the hair from wavy to straight. Most of the information around perming of the hair is totally relevant to relaxing a permanent wave in terms of the hair care, the analysis, the selection of the solution and the strength of the solution. All of that remains the same, and this is why I've brought them both in together. I think the The areas that we need to expand are the fact that with relaxing a permanent wave solutions, they come, as I've said, in paste or liquid form. So if you were to use a liquid and you weren't relaxing the entire head, you would need to protect the hair that's not being relaxed. And this can be done by either applying a conditioner to the hair not being relaxed and then wrapping a protective towel over top of it so that the solution can't drip down or get onto that hair. Or you can tie the hair that's not being relaxed into ponytails or ties or section clips so that it's completely out of the way, and then place a cotton wool strip around so that the solution can't transfer into the area that's not being relaxed. Using conditioner on its own is also a method. It would have to depend on the length of hair and the amount of hair being relaxed to determine whether that would be adequate enough. So you need to perhaps consider whether just putting conditioner on the hair is going to be enough to protect the hair. The only other difference is obviously your application methods, where with a paste or a cream you would be using a brush to apply, and then you would work that through either with your sectioning fingers, or you may, if the manufacturer recommends, use a combing method. Whereas with a liquid form, it's generally that you will comb the hair through to relax that wave down, and just check how the hair is moving to determine whether the hair is processed enough to then warrant rinsing and neutralizing. And you can look at your resource online to gather more information, and there's a number of sites available also to you online that is going to explain the process of relaxing a permanent wave versus chemical straightening. Remember, they're very different services. I think the only other area to recap on is that home hair care. With a relaxed permanent wave, your client needs to be aware that the areas that are straighter than the curly areas aren't going to have the longevity of the curly areas, and you need to make sure that if the perm has been created perhaps the week before, and you have then decided you need to relax a little bit of the curl because it's too curly through the top, or for whatever purpose you have decided to relax your permanent wave, you need to take that into consideration, that that hair has had a double service, and so you may need to alter your home hair care products and your home hair care routine. Perhaps some therapy or some treatments might be required. So today in this video I have looked at perming hair. I've looked at the chemical action of perming hair. I've talked about the features of the different waves and the strengths of the solutions. I've talked about the factors to consider in terms of your rod selection and how that impacts on your end result. We've looked at our perm placements. Last but not least are the safety factors. Now these safety factors are the same as they are for any chemical service. Don't use metal bowls. Don't let the solution come in contact with the skin. Make sure you're wiping up spillages. Don't leave your products lying around for children to drink or pour all over themselves. Making sure that you're protecting the client from any spillage, adequately caped, towels are checked regularly, she's not sitting there on a soaking wet towel. The client has a courtesy towel. If she's already mopped up solution, she may need a fresh one, so just make sure you're paying attention to that as well. I think we've covered everything in the safety factors, and there's more on this in your information resource. So one of the things I need to talk to you about is what can go wrong with a perm service and how things do go wrong with the service. If you fail to consult correctly, if you haven't analysed the hair and scalp correctly, it will be difficult for you to select the correct solution and the size of the rods to achieve the results you're looking to achieve. It's really important in your consultation process that you use visual aids so that you can see what the client means when she says, I would like my hair wavy or I would like my hair curly. There's different variations of curl, and what the client sees in her mind or imagines her hair is going to look like and what you think she's trying to tell you could be two different things. So ensuring that your consultation process is completed correctly, ensuring that from that consultation process and that agreed outcome you're selecting the right strength of solution and the right type of solution to suit the hair and scalp analysis. It then comes down to selecting the right rod or roller placement, whatever you're using to create the perm. So Clearly, if you see that you've got flat spots or drag or an uneven curl, you may well have taken too large sections and there has been drag on your sections, which has impacted on your final result. If you find that your curl is too weak, you may well have taken too big a sections, used too soft a solution, or not processed the perm for long enough. If your perm solution has been sitting on the shelf for 2 years, it's probably old and oxidized, so you need to take that into consideration as well. And just keep a small supply if you don't do a lot of perming, so that your solution is fresh and really ready for use. Making sure that your neutralizing process has taken place effectively and efficiently, so the perm solution has been completely rinsed out, it's not impacting on the neutralizing process. Making sure the towel drying is completely adequate, so that there's no water left in the hair that's going to impact on the strength of the neutralizer. Ensuring that all manufacturer's instructions have been followed, and ensuring that all care has been taken to complete things correctly and well to ensure a perfect result. So aside from those basic and fundamental areas that can impact on your result, finally, if you over process a perm, or you select the wrong strength of solution, or you've used the wrong type of solution, you could cause sensitivity to the hair or damage to the hair, or the perm to not work effectively or efficiently. It could have been over processed. It may well end up frizzy or way too curly. Now in those events, your options are to treatments, therapy, renew the health of the hair before you go on to relaxing a permanent wave, or before you start to think about doing anything more chemical to the hair. The hair's health is paramount and needs to be restored before you move on. Reflecting on what you've done throughout your perm service, if there has been an issue with your perm, if there's fish hooks, that's in the winding. If there's drag or areas of flat spots, that's in the winding. Have you applied your solution correctly? Have you gone through each step adequately and correctly so that you ensure a perfect end result? I hope that this helps to prepare you for when you are perming, and to demonstrate how vital it is that you take perming chemical services, or chemical straightening, any chemical service, very, very seriously, and make sure you take every care to complete every step of the service correctly and diligently, so that it's perfect. And that will ensure you achieve a really nice end result.